The night the orphan found him, the wind was crying like it had lost someone too. Jonah Creed sat alone beneath a sky bruised purple and black, the last light bleeding out behind the mesas. His campfire was small, no bigger than it needed to be because men with his name didn't invite attention. The flames licked at the cold air, throwing long shadows across the dirt, across the scars on his hands, across the life he'd been running from for 12 years. Jonah Creed was an outlaw, or at least that's what the wanted posters still said. Dead or alive, most folks preferred the dead part. He hadn't robbed a bank in years. Hadn't fired his gun at a man who didn't he deserve it and longer than that. But the past didn't care what kind of man you were trying to become. It followed. It waited. And when you were weakest, it called your name. That night, it came in the voice of a child. Sir? The sound cut clean through the wind. Jonah's hand moved to his revolver before his mind could stop it. He rose slowly, boots crunching against frostbitten ground, eyes scanning the darkness beyond the firelight. Who's there? He called, his voice low and rough from disuse. Silence. Then from the edge of the shadows, a small shape stepped forward. A boy. No more than 7 or 8. Too thin for the cold he stood in. His coat was patched and torn, sleeves too short for his wrists. Dark hair fell into his eyes, and his face was smudged with dirt and dried tears. He wasn't crying now. He was singing, softly, barely louder than the wind, a lullaby. Jonah froze. Not because there was a child in the wilderness at night, which was strange enough, but because of the song. His breath caught in his chest as if someone had struck him there. No one sang that lullaby anymore. No one alive. The boy's voice trembled as he finished the last line, then looked up at Jonah with eyes too old for his face. My mama used to sing it, the boy said. Before she died, the fire popped, sending sparks into the sky. Jonah couldn't speak. His knees felt weak, like the ground might give way beneath him. That song, Jonah finally managed, his voice barely a whisper. Where did you learn it? The boy shrugged. Mama said her mama sang it to her. Said it was for when the world felt too big. Jonah turned away, staring into the fire so the child wouldn't see the tears welling in his eyes. His wife, Eliza, had sung that lullaby on nights when the coyotes howled too close to the ranch. On nights when the memories of war and blood wouldn't let Jonah sleep. She'd hum it while brushing her hair, while folding laundry, while rocking an empty cradle that was never filled. Elisa had been dead 5 years. Buried under a cottonwood tree with a wooden cross Jonah carved himself, his hands shaking the whole time. No one else knew that song. Jonah swallowed hard and faced the boy again. What's your name? Samuel, the boy said, but Mama called me Sam. Jonah nodded. Where's your father, Sam? Sam's eyes dropped to the ground. Never had one. A familiar ache twisted in Jonah's chest. And your mother? The boy hesitated. Then, in a voice stripped of all childhood softness, he said, They buried her this morning. The wind carried those words away, but the weight of them stayed. In the town? Jonah asked. Sam nodded. Ridgewood. Jonah knew the place. Small frontier town a day's ride east. A preacher, a saloon, a sheriff who'd like nothing more than to hang Jonah Creed if he ever rode through. What are you doing out here alone? Jonah asked. Sam lifted his chin, trying to be brave. I was looking for help. Jonah almost laughed at the cruelty of it. You found the wrong man, son. Sam looked at him carefully. Are you Jonah Creed? The name landed like a gunshot. Jonah's hand tightened at his side. Who told you that? Mama did, Sam said. She said if anything ever happened to her, I was supposed to find you. The world seemed to tilt. She said you were a good man, Sam went on quickly, like he was afraid Jonah might interrupt. Said you made bad choices once, but you paid for them. Said you loved someone very much. Jonah's throat burned. What was your mother's name? Sam's voice softened. Mary Bell. Jonah staggered back as if struck. Mary Bell. He hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in years. Mary Bell had been Eliza's younger sister. The girl who used to laugh too loud and dream too big. The one Jonah had helped escape an abusive husband by giving her money and a horse, swearing she'd be safer far from his shadow. Mary Bell was supposed to be in California, alive, safe. Jonah dropped to one knee in front of the boy, eyes searching his face. He saw it then, the curve of the brow, the shape of the eyes. Eliza's eyes. She never told me who my father was, Sam said quietly. But she said you'd protect me if you could. Jonah closed his eyes. The sins of his past rose up like ghosts. Mary Bell's husband hadn't just been abusive. He'd been cruel, dangerous, A man Jonah had confronted once in a fit of rage. A man who disappeared soon after. Some man vanished in the west without questions. Jonah had never asked where that man went. Now he wondered if the past had finally come collecting. "I can't take you into Ridgewood," Jonah said after a long silence. "They'll recognize me," Sam's shoulders sagged. "Then, what am I supposed to do?" The fire crackled between them. Jonah looked at the boy standing alone in the dark, carrying grief too heavy for his small frame. Every instinct Jonah had screamed to send him away. And every memory of Eliza begged him not to. He stood and pulled his blanket from the saddle, wrapping it around Sam's shoulders. "You'll stay with me tonight," Jonah said. "We'll figure the rest come morning." Sam nodded, relief washing over his face. "Thank you, sir." Jonah stared out into the darkness, a familiar dread settling in his gut. Because somewhere out there, the law still hunted Jonah Creed, and somewhere closer, a secret tied to blood and violence was waking from its grave. As the fire burned low, Sam curled up beneath the blanket and began to hum again, soft, slow, familiar. Jonah listened, his heart breaking all over. And far beyond the circle of firelight, a horse's hoofs struck stone. Once, then again. Jonah's hand went to his gun as a shadow moved at the edge of the night. The past had found him. And this time, it wasn't coming alone. Jonah didn't sleep that night. He sat with his back against a cold rock, his revolver resting across his knees, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the dying fire. Every sound set his nerves on edge. The wind whispering through dry grass, the distant cry of an owl, the soft shift of Sam's breathing. The hoofbeat he'd heard never returned. But that didn't mean the danger had passed. It only meant it was waiting. When dawn finally crept over the plains, pale and fragile as a promise, Jonah felt older than his years. The boy stirred beneath the blanket, rubbing his eyes. "Morning," Sam said softly. Jonah just nodded. "Morning." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The whole world felt suspended, like that silent pause right before a gunshot. "We can't stay here," Jonah finally said, his voice rough. "We'll head north. There's an old homestead by Dry Willow Creek. No one goes there anymore." Sam hesitated, his small face etched with worry. "Why not the town?" Jonah looked at him, trying to weigh how much truth a child could carry. "Because some folks in town remember me," he said. And not kindly. Sam studied Jonah's face, his expression serious. "Mama said you were dangerous once. But she said you were kind." Jonah let out a slow breath, the words hitting him harder than he expected. "Kindness doesn't erase blood," they rode out just after sunrise. Jonah on his chestnut Maori, with Sam perched in front of him, his little hands clutching the saddle horn for dear life. The land stretched out wide and empty, golden grass bending under the morning light. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, Jonah felt hunted. They hadn't gone more than an hour when he spotted it, a plume of dust rising behind them. He reined in the horse, his eyes narrowing. Someone was following. He urged the mare forward, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs as he scanned the horizon for any sign of cover. By the time they reached a stand of cottonwoods near a dry ravine, the rider behind them was close enough to make out details. "A badge," Jonah swore under his breath. "Sam," he said quietly, his voice low and urgent. "If anything happens, you do exactly what I say, you understand me?" Sam nodded, a flicker of fear crossing his face. The rider approached slowly, his hand resting casually near his holster. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man, with a gray mustache and eyes that had seen far too many bodies laid out in the dirt. "Well, I'll be damned," the man said, his voice a low drawl. "Jonah Creed." Jonah didn't even twitch toward his gun. "Morning, Sheriff Harlan. I thought you'd be smarter than to ride this close to Ridgewood," Harlan said, his eyes drifting down to Sam. "Didn't expect to see you with a child. Not my idea," Jonah replied flatly. Harlan dismounted, his boots crunching against the dry gravel. "Town buried Mary Bell yesterday." Jonah stiffened, the name hitting him like a physical blow. "She was my sister-in-law," Jonah said, his voice tight. "Didn't know she was back." Harlan's gaze sharpened, becoming hard as flint. "She didn't come back by choice. She came running. Said someone was after her." Jonah's blood ran cold. "Who?" Harlan leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Ezekiel Crow." The name struck Jonah like a hammer. Crow, a bounty hunter with a reputation for cruelty and a terrifying amount of patience. A man who never forgot a debt or a grudge. "I thought Crow was dead," Jonah managed to say. Most men who cross him wish he were, Harlan replied grimly. Mary claimed Crow believed you owed him something. Jonah's mind raced, a flood of memories he'd tried to bury rushing back. Years ago, Crow had been part of a posse hunting him. Men had died that day. Crow had survived, barely. You seen him? Jonah asked, his voice strained. Harlan nodded toward the horizon. He rode into town last night, asked a lot of questions. Left before dawn. Jonah tightened his grip on the reins, his knuckles turning white. What about the boy? Harlan asked, his eyes returning to Sam. Jonah hesitated for a fraction of a second. Then, for once in his life, he chose the simple, unvarnished truth. He's Mary's son. Harlan studied Sam more closely now, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. She left him with you? She trusted me, Jonah said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. The sheriff sighed, a long, weary sound. That woman always had too much faith in broken men. He straightened up, his professional demeanor returning. Crow's not after the boy. He's after you. And if he finds you with that child, he'll use him. Sam's small hand gripped Jonah's coat even tighter. I won't let that happen, Jonah said, his voice a low growl. Harlan just shook his head slowly. You don't get to decide how this ends, Jonah. Crow's filed a bounty in 3 counties. Dead or alive. Jonah met his gaze, his own eyes burning with a desperate fire. Then let me go. The sheriff was silent for a long moment, the only sound the wind rustling the leaves of the cottonwoods. Then he spoke, his voice quiet. You saved my brother in the war. Pulled him from a burning field while bullets tore the sky apart. Jonah looked away, unable to meet the man's gaze. I won't turn you in, Harlan continued. But I can't protect you either. Get that boy somewhere safe. And end this. With that, Harlan mounted his horse and rode off without another word, leaving Jonah and Sam alone in the vast, empty landscape. They didn't speak again until the sun was high in the sky. Is someone trying to kill you? Sam asked softly, his voice barely a whisper. Yes, Jonah said, the single word heavy with everything left unsaid. Because of bad things you did? Yes. Sam was quiet for a moment, thinking. Mama said bad things don't make you bad forever. Jonah swallowed hard against the lump forming in his throat. By dusk, they reached the old homestead, a skeleton of a house with weathered boards, a collapsed roof, and memories of another life clinging to its broken walls. Jonah made a small fire inside the ruined hearth while Sam explored, his childish curiosity a strange contrast to the grim reality of their situation. He found a cracked piece of a mirror and an old wooden horse, its paint faded and chipped, carved by Jonah himself years ago. You made this? Sam asked, holding it up. Jonah nodded. For someone who never got to use it. That night, as Sam slept soundly by the fire, Jonah stepped outside, staring up at the endless blanket of stars. He knew Crow would come. There was no doubt. And he knew that running, hiding, would never be enough to save the boy. The only way out was through. At dawn, Jonah saddled the horse. Where are we going? Sam asked, his eyes wide. Jonah looked south, back toward Ridgewood, toward the past he'd tried so hard to escape. To face what I buried, he said, his voice filled with a new grim resolve. And to make sure you don't inherit my sins. They rode back toward town. And behind them, far off but relentless, Ezekiel Crow followed their trail, a patient predator, smiling to himself, certain that by sundown, Jonah Creed would finally stop running. And that the boy would learn what blood truly cost. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like and subscribe for more. The sun was sinking as Jonah Creed rode back toward Ridgewood, its red light spilling across the plains like a warning written in blood. In front of him, Sam sat quietly. He no longer asked questions. Somewhere between the abandoned homestead and the distant outline of the town, the boy had learned what men twice his age often never did, that courage sometimes meant staying silent and trusting the heart beating behind you. Ridgewood came into view slowly. The church steeple, the water tower, the saloon crouched like a sinner waiting for confession. Smoke curled from chimneys, a sign of life that went on, completely unaware it was about to brush against something old and violent. Just outside of town, Jonah reined in the horse. This is where I stop running, he said, his voice low and firm. Sam looked up, his small face filled with a question he couldn't quite voice. Will you come back? Jonah managed a sad smile. I'll do my best. He dismounted and lifted Sam down from the saddle, kneeling so their eyes met. From inside his coat, Jonah pulled out a small object wrapped in cloth. He unfolded it carefully, revealing a silver locket. Inside was a faded drawing of a woman with kind eyes and soft hair. "My wife," Jonah said, his voice thick with memory. "Eliza." Sam's breath caught in his throat. "She looks like Mama," Jonah nodded. "She was her sister, which makes you family." Sam just stared at the locket, then back at Jonah, the realization dawning in his eyes. "Does that mean—" "It means," Jonah said gently, "you're not alone in this world." He closed Sam's small fingers around the locket. "No matter what happens tonight, you remember that." Before Sam could even speak, a voice cut through the evening air, sharp and mocking. "Well now," it drawled. "A family reunion." Ezekiel Crow stepped out from between two buildings, dust clinging to his long black coat, his eyes cold and amused. He held a rifle loosely, like it was a natural extension of his arm. "Been a long time, Creed," Crow said, his voice dripping with venom. "I always knew you'd come back. Men like you can't outrun what they owe." Jonah slowly stood, deliberately placing himself between Crow and the boy. "Let the boy go," Jonah said, his voice dangerously calm. "This is between you and me." Crow just chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Everything's between me and you, Jonah. The boy's just leverage." But before Crow could make a move, Sheriff Harlan appeared in the saloon doorway, his gun already drawn. Townsfolk began to gather at a distance, their whispers rippling through the tense air. "Crow," Harlan said, his voice steady. "This ends here, tonight." Crow's smile widened into a cruel grin. "You planning to protect him, Sheriff, even now?" Harlan didn't answer. Jonah turned his head just slightly, his eyes never leaving Crow. "Take Sam to the church," he murmured to the sheriff. "And don't look back." Sam hesitated, his eyes welling with tears. "Don't sing the lullaby," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Mama said it was for endings." Jonah closed his eyes for a moment, a flicker of pain crossing his face. "Then remember it for beginnings." Sam ran. Crow raised his rifle, but Jonah moved faster. The gunshot echoed across Ridgewood, shattering the quiet like glass. A searing pain ripped through Jonah's shoulder, but he gritted his teeth and stayed on his feet, drawing his own revolver. The two men began to circle each other in the dust, the entire world narrowing to the space between them, to breath and heartbeat and the cold steel in their hands. "You took everything from me," Crow snarled, his face contorted with rage. "My men. My name." Jonah's voice was steady, cutting through the hatred. "And you took everything from Mary Bell, from Elisa, from that boy." Crow fired again. This time, Jonah fired once. The single shot rolled across the plains and into the twilight. Crow stumbled, a look of surprise on his face, before he fell to the dusty street. Silence followed, thick and heavy. Jonah stood there, smoke curling from the barrel of his gun, until his strength finally gave out and he dropped to one knee. Sheriff Harlan rushed forward, pressing a hand to Jonah's bleeding wound. "You're bleeding bad," Harlan said, his voice urgent. Jonah just smiled faintly. "I've bled worse." Just then, Sam emerged from the church doorway, his eyes wide with fear and hope. "Is it over?" he asked. Jonah looked at him and nodded. "It's over. They buried Ezekiel Crow outside town, far from any marker. Some men didn't deserve remembrance. But Jonah Creed didn't see another sunrise. He passed away quietly that night in the small room behind the church, the sound of Sam humming the lullaby, soft and trembling, beside him. Jonah's last breath left with a smile on his lips, as if Eliza herself had come to lead him home. Weeks later, spring had touched the plains, bringing new life to the harsh land. Sam stood by a cottonwood tree on a small plot of land just outside Ridgewood. A simple wooden cross marked the grave. It read, "Jonah Creed, a man who found his way back." Sheriff Harlan came and placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. "Your uncle was a hard man," he said softly. "But he was a good one in the end." Sam just nodded, clutching the silver locket in his hand. That night, in a small house filled with the warm glow of lamplight, Sam sang the lullaby to himself. He didn't sing it in sorrow, but in hope, because some songs don't belong to the dead. They belong to the living, to those who carry love forward into the future. And somewhere, out beyond the wide open sky, a man who had once been an outlaw was finally at rest, redeemed not by the past he had escaped, but by the child he chose to protect. Thank you so much for watching. If this story moved you, please consider liking and subscribing for more tales from the heart of the Old West. We'll see you in the next one.